Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Go-To Food Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and please leave us your comments and ratings across all devices. Today, we're humbled and honoured to be joined by one of the most important chefs in the history of gastronomy, in Ashely Palmer-Watts, a man who, alongside Don Heston, changed the way we eat, think and appreciate food. Former head chef of the infamous 3 Michelin Starred Fat Duck and the 2 Michelin Starred Dinner by Heston, but is now owner of the latest, hottest ticket in town, the Devonshire in Soho. Actually, I thought we would start by saying Heston's getting a lot of shit in the papers about his 450 quid Christmas dinner.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. I mean, is that too much to charge or not? And obviously you worked on it. He said it's completely different to any normal Christmas dinner. Can you take us through some like crazy offerings if you remember any?
Well, I mean, the Fat Duck is unlike any other restaurant in the country by a mile. So I think it's very difficult for people to compare that to anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But you know how it works in the papers.
Yeah.
They like
anything for a headline. But
Yeah.
the Fat Duck's an incredible restaurant, incredible experience, and I'm not sure what the new one is. I left nearly 5 years ago, so it will be extraordinary for sure.
But can you remember anything like weird and wonderful on your Christmas when you were there?
The Christmas menus. There was the gold frankincense and myrrh dish,
Which was what?
which was based around the mock turtle soup, but then it changed and it incorporated those three key ingredients into the broth. So instead of the little pocket watch that was dissolved in the teapot, it was actually a little gold block with 3 crowns on the top. So it's like a little gold inglet that you put into the thing,
Oh my God.
dissolved into the concentrated stock.
Christ, that's awesome.
How do with the dish like that? Is Heston coming in and saying, "I've had a fucking brilliant idea, boys. This is," or are you all, and then you have to work out how to make it work, or are you all in the sort of coming up with it together? How does that work? I mean, it's so mad.
I think it's a mixture of things. Obviously Heston, led the whole Fat Duck for many years, but it takes a lot of people with a lot of diverse skills to make these things that are just not normal, or certainly weren't normal, early 2000s, into these things that we see all, we see it all the time now.
Yeah.
Great British Menu and all the sorts of things like that. But ideas could come from anywhere, and that was the beauty. If you have a creative environment, no idea is a stupid idea.
Yeah, right. So there's no eye rolling. It's like, brilliant.
Exactly.
How do we make this work?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we had people from all over the world, and you just hoovered up all these nuggets of information. And sometimes a lot of things come from just trying something that doesn't work, but something really cool happens.
Comes out the other side of it, yeah.
Oh, if we did that a little bit different, maybe we could achieve that.
Yeah.
You left the Fat Duck in 2020.
Yep.
20 years of service.
Yep.
How come you decided to leave?
I think it's a now or never period. Obviously, we opened dinner in London. We opened in Melbourne. We ran that for 5 years. We had another one that we designed, ready to go almost. It was being built in Dubai,
Right.
out on the Palm, and that was really delayed. And to be honest, it's one of those things. It's not easy leaving after 20 years. There's a lot of comfort there, and I really enjoyed what I did, and I ran dinner in London, and that really felt like my restaurant.
Yeah, I was going to say, by that stage, it's almost as much. The whole thing's almost as much yours as his in some ways.
We had a great relationship working together, and it was just one of those things. I didn't want to get to 60 and think, oh, I wish I'd done this and I'd done that. Now, no one knew COVID was coming along, obviously, 3 or 4 months after I left. So what I had planned then turned into a bit of an ordeal. But actually, I had a great time over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Well, it does mean now that you're one of the 3 owners of the Devonshire, a year since it opened, almost to the day. I mean, you probably thought it was going to be a success with the dream team assembled, but I'm guessing you never thought it was going to be such a viral sensation as it's become.
Yeah, we Charlie, Osh, and myself, we've been around a while. We're not young guys anymore. No. But I think the vision of what Charlie and Osh had, and then when they brought me in, and we kind of distilled that further into the way we were going to execute the menu and how we were going to set this up, that we could do big covers. And I think there's just this real lovely energy there that everyone that comes through the door, we just want to have a good time.
Must have a nice time.
I know that sounds cheesy,
No,
but actually, some people just want to go to the pub and have a pint and a packet of crisps and maybe a sausage on a stick or a Scotch egg or a steak sandwich, where others will come and dine upstairs, where 3 courses £29, or you could be eating a 1.4 kilo T-bone. It's up to you. It really is for everybody, and I think that's really struck a chord with the public.
When you were thinking about the menu there, what was in your head? What were your inspirations, or what were you trying to kind of? I don't know. Were there things that you thought we could replicate that'd be amazing? Or
well, when I first met with Charlie and Osh, and that came about sort of end of 2022, and they explained to me that they were going to be opening this pub. They'd been talking about it for 10 years, and finally Osh had left the Guinea Grill with Young's. And funny enough, we only followed each other on Instagram. I didn't really know Osh at all, but I remember texting a friend of mine going, because we went to the Guinea, and I said, I wonder where this Oshian guy's off to.
Yeah.
And then about 2 or 3 months later, get this text, and he says, "Oh, do you fancy a pint and a chat?" So I thought, and at this time, I just decided that I wasn't going to do any restaurants in 2023, but I would go and have a chat and a pint because I'd always wanted to meet him.
He's
Mr. Pub, right?
Yeah.
And so I went along to the Coach and Horses in Soho, met with him, and he explained that he and this guy been talking about this pub. He's finally got him out of where he was with Young's, and they were trying to find a site, and it's going to be big and it's going to be central. They want to mix English pub with sort of British chop house and have this kind of wood-fired cooking and butcher in the basement and age all the meat, because Charlie is the founder.
Yeah.
Flat Iron. I thought, this sounds really good. And I remember saying to Emma, my wife, I went home and I said, it sounds really good, But I was also planning another thing that was out of town.
Was she like you said you weren't going to do?
Yeah, which I said I wasn't going to do.
Like, yeah.
And so 2 things came along, and I thought, do you know what? The old me probably would have been too cautious and chose one. But I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go for it. One will be late, and sure enough, one is really late.
Yeah.
And we basically sat down in Osh's flat in Soho for 3 separate days. And the menu you see in the restaurant now is basically, we talked through all of those dishes like 3 hungry gastronomes sitting around drinking coffee all day.
Just obsessing over...
Not Guinness.
No, there was absolutely not until the end of the day.
Yeah.
There might have been a few pints at the end of the day, but it was more about what did each of us love, what each of us didn't like about things, where were the best ones we've ever eaten, what were the really cool little touch points that we could add, and then I would distill that down and then make a plan, but adding the sort of the things that make the difference.
Yeah. How much, because when you did dinner, a lot of that was looking back into British food, right?
Yeah.
Going like deep and like,
Yeah,
going way back.
Yeah.
How much of that kind of informed then your kind of this, or not really?
I think, it's not so much about history. One really clear thing that it would have been really easy to turn up 6 or 8 weeks before opening, get in the kitchen, we open the recipe books up, and we pull together all the dishes from what we were looking at. But actually, and this is, I believe this really is at the core of what that restaurant's about, and the success of it is that we spent 1 year developing every single recipe from scratch.
Yeah, right.
I have a lot of recipes, a lot of experience over 25 years.
Yeah.
But actually, everything started from scratch. So what was the benchmark? We said, well, actually, let's make the new benchmark and make this even better, more consistent, easier to make, maybe a little bit more streamlined. Try and pull in ingredients that have multiple purposes across the menu.
Yeah.
So, for example, sauces and gravies, we make one base and then we take it 3 or 4 different ways. But you wouldn't know that.
No.
So, and we spent 1 year, me and another guy who's worked with me for a long time on development. And we spent a year on the menu, and we knew when a dish was ready, when you got that kind of, that's it. Yeah, that's...
Was it hard, though, because you've had 20 years of creating dissolving watches and crazy different, outfits in many ways, in an edible sense, to then just look at a pork chop and put it on a grill? Obviously, it's a lot more complex than that, but in terms of the simplicity of the menu compared to Heston or Dinner by Heston or...
I think the thing, it's always been the case, to cook really simply is actually quite difficult. We have a tendency to overdo things all the time. Not for Well, in some cases, I suppose people do overdo it because you look at some things and go, there's about 1 billion things on here. None of it really makes sense. And you've really cocked up the way you've executed this dish, probably from trying to achieve too complex a thing in your lane, so to speak. But this was about great sourcing of ingredients, direct in many ways from the boats, from the abattoirs and farmers, looking after it in the best way with the dry aging, and then cooking over coals. Now, I would say that's probably the most primitive style of cooking.
Yeah.
Burning wood in a chamber, shoveling onto a grill, and then learning how to work with those coals that you've created. It's not charcoal.
No.
Charcoal you light, gets hot, and then you have this slow drop off, and then it goes out. Whereas embers, you've got to keep feeding it all the time. So it's like spinning plates a lot of the time, and you're trying to cook at the same time. So primitive, but highly technical and very, very challenging.
Yeah, well, because also you unashamedly said you wanted to do big covers.
Yeah.
And so, but then you've brought in a form of cooking that is a level of complexity that wouldn't necessarily lend itself to doing that.
I mean, we really sort of put ourselves out of a comfort zone here as well, because for every kitchen I've worked in, apart from probably one that I started in New York once, they're all paper-driven tickets.
Yeah.
We built a screen system with Charlie mainly, and it was one that when an order comes in, it goes to a specific place in the kitchen and they crack on. So it's not a conventional kitchen where you've got someone calling the order out.
Yeah, we chef.
There isn't none of that, really.
Really?
No.
So it just hits the section.
It hits the section.
And they see it.
And we've timed everything so it hits sections at different times. So if it's a big steak, it goes straight to the grill. So that gets on, we char it, and then we bring it on in the oven to the desired cuisson and then put it in the warming drawers. Whereas if it's a piece of sea bass or langoustines or lobster, the kitchen will fire that when the main's away. He will see that, the chef will see that on his screen.
Yeah.
He'll fire it. That appears on the screen. Lobster goes on. So that was quite hard to build a system for a restaurant that we hadn't actually lit the fire yet.
Does that have like AI involved? Or?
No, thank God, probably.
Yeah.
So
that would have been harder.
Have you put in timings? Sort of ideal, that this should take this long, so therefore...
Yeah, and you sit in a room with the company and there's like about 10 screens up there and you start putting through these orders and I tell you, it's pretty challenging to get your head around. When you come out of a meeting, you're broken.
Yeah, I bet.
But it works very well.
What about storytelling? I mean, Tom Aikens, Tom Sellers are still very much inspired by your work and Heston's work. That was a huge part of the narrative of the Fat Duck, which we are going to come on to in proper detail. But like, do you feel, that seems to be such a huge part of the meal.
Yeah.
Does it feel weird to be serving things not cold, but without that kind of like, I don't know.
Well, you know what? I would say the Devonshire is about storytelling. It's about people being in the moment and being part of that sort of energy. So our front of house team, are the loveliest, warmest, passionate people. They might not be all the most experienced because we have really young guys, might be their first job, but actually they've come on as part of almost like they sort of bring on that ethos and that excitement about how delightfully simple it is. But actually the 3 lamb chops aren't just 3 lamb chops on a plate. It's got rendered lamb fat from the caps that we trim when we French trim the racks. We then render that down in the oven, chill it, and then we'll cold infuse mint leaves only for 24 hours. Then we'll take those out. That gets brushed on just before service. So cooked over coal, brushed on, and people eat them and just go, how does that taste like?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make sense. So they have all these nuggets of information, whether it's where we've come from, how we age all our food downstairs, all our meat downstairs, where everything comes from, how we're cooking, who's doing it. There's me, Charlie, and Osh floating around, and there's great artwork in the building. Obviously, the music, the Guinness, and before you know it, actually, you're just telling different stories.
Yeah.
And we have some fantastic stories that we have to tell.
Has it changed your perception of molecular gastronomy? I mean, the fact that you're now doing, as Grace Dent wrote last week or the week before, the best comfort food in the country. Has that kind of shifted your perception? You spent 20 years being a slave and also a scholar to molecular gastronomy.
Do you know what? I think I've always taken the approach that I think that there's room for every type of restaurant in the world, to be honest. But let's bring it to this country. You've got the most incredible, let's say, fine dining. I hate the word fine dining. I can't think of another word for it. Or gastronomic.
Yeah.
But actually, I think people's habits change quite a lot. You know, if you roll back to the research that we did for dinner, looking at what the Victorians did, the Edwardians, and all of the different ages, their cultural eating habits changed. You know, quite progressively, really, to where we are today. I mean, you guys are quite young, and I'm too young to remember, but before I was a chef, and probably about 1980, there weren't that many great restaurants in London or in the country.
4 maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there were some good places all around, but it's a different country now. So that evolution, how people, I think COVID changed people quite a lot. They eat a lot earlier now because, I don't know, we're much more conscious about sleep. I never heard anyone talking about sleep when I was younger.
True. Yeah,
that's true.
There are sleep experts on podcasts. You could listen to them all day.
Yeah.
So I think all of these things feed into what people are doing. And I think sometimes people want something really simple, no fuss. Other times people want to go out and take more time and enjoy the complexity of certain things, and maybe things that are unique, that have integrity to that chef. I think where it falls down is if it's just nice food.
Yeah.
And it's kind of caught in a really tricky space. I think that's hard space to be in.
Yeah.
Feels like time to have a drink. Ben, did we bring anything today? Actually, do you could you share a drink with us?
I mean, I brought something, yeah.
Yeah, why not? Sounds good.
I've made a little beefy treat for later. So I just bought a bottle of red wine.
Oh.
Do you have a glass of red wine?
Yeah, why not?
Just a Beaujolais Village, Freddie.
Oh, lovely. That's a lovely choice. Actually, you started to work in the industry as a 12-year-old, as a part-time pot washer in the Petit Canard. Is that where you fell in love with food? I mean, can you share with us your sort of childhood foodie love story, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, it's not terribly romantic and that sort of thing, but it was fairly normal where I grew up in Dorset to have quite a big vegetable garden. My granddad kind of ran that. He had his own one and an allotment. So it was more a case of like all of this food was available in the summer, and I just remember them prepping it all and then freezing it, and whether it's runner beans and whatnot, storing carrots and potatoes in the shed, etc. I remember when Waitrose first opened in Dorchester, which was the nearest town.
A great day.
And that, that was, I mean, but the generation now, like my kids, these things are everywhere.
Yeah.
It was a very different time. Right. My family wasn't really gastronomic, just normal food. Shepherd's pie, bangers and mash, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
My gran was a butcher, and there was a butcher shop in the village. So she was a butcher for 50 years. And I used to go in through this door every day, and the chef was from Canada. The wife was English, but lived in Canada and Sweden. And it was like it's a bit like Narnia. You go into a different world.
Yeah.
And I just kind of hung around. Even if I wasn't needed, I'd just kind of stand around and watch. And I sort of realised when I was I loved the environment and I loved the food. I didn't really necessarily say at 12, I want to be a chef. It was, I wanted to go into the army and be an armourer and mess around with guns.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went to join, and I was too young, and I had to go back in 3 months. And in that 3-month period, I decided, actually, I quite fancy being a chef now.
Yeah.
Actually, because...
It reminded me a lot of Marco. He always speaks about the box tree with Malcolm Reed and Cullen Long.
Yeah.
When he started working there, they showed him the magical world of Michelin. They opened his eyes to like what food was like outside of Yorkshire and outside of England. And I know when you were working there, when you joined full time at 16, they also showed you. They took you to trips, right? Around.
Yeah, so we would come up to London, come to the restaurant show. I used to sit there from like as soon as it opened to the last thing at night, watching every single chef that did the demo on demo stage, from Marco to Eric Chavot, Philip Britton, all sorts. Stephen Terry, there's that era of chefs. And I remember, I just used to love that. And but at the same time, because where they were from, my food the cookbooks that were available in their house were all North American. So Charlie Trotter, Charlie Palmer, Jeremiah Tower, Alice Waters.
Yeah.
Obviously then Thomas Keller came along a little bit later. So I had this kind of real mixture of, very different mixture than English gastronomy.
Yeah.
You only had a few guys in the UK that had books. Nico, John Burton Race, Gordon, Marco, etc. Obviously White Heat was, I spent hours looking at that as a young chef.
So that did get you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really into photography as well, and I think the photography in that book, I think, is absolute game changer.
It's amazing,
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Sort of like a porn mag to like people who love food, wasn't it?
It's incredible.
It was.
I mean,
We
the
took it to
guy.
bed and
I don't know. That's so
Kissed
no,
it.
it's amazing.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it meant a lot and did a lot for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, really, a lot of people in this country.
Yeah.
We're talking about literature, which did a lot. Having read about the Fat Duck in a magazine in 1998, you then went to eat there. Can you tell us how different the food and space was when you first ate there? And also, you obviously had a moment during that meal where you fell in love with it so much that you wanted to work there.
Yeah.
And ended up basically the next 20 years.
Oh, I can remember it like it was yesterday. It was, I went in and it was that sort of, what do you call those really rough carpets? They're like matting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hard tablecloths, wrought iron chairs that were quite uncomfortable, really massive flower pot urns, this sort of big with driftwood and random bits and pieces coming out.
Yeah.
Massive. I mean, it's a tiny building, right?
Yeah.
But, a mirror on the wall that's probably, 15 feet long by 8 feet, just covered the entire wall. So it was a crazy space. It had some really cool art.
Yeah.
Big copper bar in the corner by the stairs. And it was really cold and drafty because it was in January when I went. And I think I went with 3 others that were a little bit older than me. And I'd read about it, and that was where I wanted to go. So we drove up from Winchester, where they lived, and went for dinner. I ordered this crepinette of scallops, which was like crepinette, and then inside was a layer of scallop, a layer of Chios pepper, truffle, and spinach. And it looked kind of odd, but it was like multicoloured little phallic thing.
Pillar.
With this pea puree and some peas with this truffle foam that's made with the scallop skirts. It was unlike anything else I'd ever seen. You're just how? And then main course was a chicken. 2 of us shared it. It was poached in truffle juice and Madeira. It came with a crepinette of cep macaroni, some roasted ceps, pea puree, and this chicken. And I think I latter found out that for every chicken sold, he lost about 25 quid. But that was that was how bonkersly brilliant it was.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not very viable, but he wanted to do it, and he did it.
Yeah,
and that's what he's doing. And then I had this delice of chocolate with Griotine cherries and vanilla ice cream. And this ice cream was Tahitian vanilla ice cream, which, Tahitian vanilla's everywhere now. But back then, there wasn't much Tahitian vanilla around.
No.
Has a very different characteristic. And he had just a little bit of coffee in there. And at that time, I didn't really like coffee. So I knew there was something else in there. And I asked, is there something else in there like coffee? It was really amazing.
Yeah.
And just had the most brilliant meal. And I just had to go and work there.
But how did you end up getting a job there? Because it was only a brigade of 5 people, right?
Yeah. So I wrote a letter asking to go and do a stage.
Just on the back of that meal.
On the back of that.
Yeah.
And then when we closed for whenever it was, I think it was in the summer, I went there for 2 weeks, and he was like, wow, this is brilliant. I only ever get criminals or wrong. So yeah, come on in. There wasn't really much space. I had no clue what was going on.
Yeah.
Because I'd only worked in the kitchen with one person.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And obviously there were 4 or 5 guys in the kitchen. So it was incredible. And then I wrote to him and said, look, it's the only place I want to work. Do you have a job? And sent him my CV. I've only ever had one job on my CV. And he phoned back. Well, it's actually coincidental. The restaurant where I was working, they sold, and they were moving to either Vancouver or Ireland. And on the last service, the people I came in for dinner with at Fat Duck were in for dinner at the restaurant. And I remember talking to them. They said, oh, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm just going to carry on working during the summer. I've written to Heston to ask for a job. And one of the guys that I went to the Fat Duck with is a watercress farmer that I worked for in the morning. So I said, look, I'm just going to work with this guy called Herdy and, I don't know, play golf in the afternoons and shoot stuff on the farm, and we'll see what comes up and go from there. And then literally that night, I went home about 2:00 in the morning, and there was a note on my bed from my dad saying, play the answer phone, because everyone had answer phone.
Yeah.
Play the answer phone. So I played the answer phone, and it was Heston leaving a message saying, give me a ring. I might have a job. Wow. So then it took about 8 weeks or something. I had to ring like 2 or 3 times a week. It was a nightmare. I'd phone. They would answer the kitchen phone. Oh, he's just left. He's just gone upstairs. Okay. So there was no posh phone that you could, you know, so you had to phone a different number. So I was really nervous because I was only 20. Really, really nervous. So did that 2 or 3 times a week. Was getting on a bit now. It's like 8 weeks. I did a stage at Le Manoir for 2 weeks in pastry. Spent a bit of time in the kitchen. And went for lunch on my way home on the Wednesday. Heston comes out and he says, oh yeah, I do have a job. Can you start Saturday? I was like, yeah, sure. No worries.
Obviously.
Well, I'll do it. Yeah, well, it made it happen. You know, didn't have anywhere to live. Didn't really know how much money I was earning for the job. Like, I had no clue, but I was just like, well, yeah, we'll make it work.
What? Because the food as you just described it, that meal you sat and had there, and obviously you said no one else was doing that type of food.
Yeah.
But it still sounds closer to sort of a classical style of cooking than the Fat Duck that we know now in our minds. What was he on? Must have been on a journey to kind of go somewhere.
Yeah, I think everything's a journey. It's an evolution. At that stage, we had the lunch menu and the a la carte. But another couple of dishes were, roasted cod dusted with dried orange and lemon powder with licorice and mint.
Right.
Lentils with balsamic, with a braised coxcomb, with I can't remember the red wine, like a really intense red wine sort of reduction with that. So you got this gelatinous coxcomb with a piece of cod with lentils and
right. So he was
on route.
He was doing his own thing. You know, it was his interpretation of, I guess, a mixture of French and what became English cuisine. And then that was sort of, the a la carte was around for a long time, and I was actually talking about it yesterday to a blogger called Elizabeth on Food. Yeah, she's from the Netherlands, and a few years ago, well, actually it's probably about 6 years ago now, when Johnny Lake left the Fat Duck, we did a few dishes that we did earlier on in our career that were no longer on the menu, and they went on Instagram or whatever, and I got a message saying, oh my God, I never came to the Fat Duck when these dishes were on. And it was the langoustine and pig strata lasagna with truffle sauce, the cannelloni of cuttlefish with duck confit and parsley and shiso broth, crab risotto with the crab ice cream. And so I said, well, actually, do you know what? Next, if you give us enough notice, I'll come back to the Fat Duck and I'll work with the new team that don't really know these dishes. Yeah. And we'll do these for you. Wow. And we were talking about it yesterday.
That's
she was
so cool.
At the Devonshire, and she said it's probably the best time I've ever eaten at Fat Duck. Those dishes, and she said on the day, if you opened a restaurant today serving these dishes, these are still strong 3 Michelin star
mind
dishes,
blowing.
even though time has moved on.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is where that core of the Fat Duck really is, because everything tastes good, you know.
Yeah. When you walked through the doors 28th of August 1999, did you know what, incredible impact you're going to have on the world of food, let alone the tiny village outside London, let alone the country? You guys changed the face of food forevermore across the world. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really. I mean, we were just doing what we were doing, literally working 6 days a week, head down, didn't know what was going on in the outside world for
really.
A good
Did it feel like that?
Oh yeah. Well, all we cared about was what we were doing.
Yeah.
Why would you care about anything else? Because we were on this journey, and from 01 to 08, I think was just the most incredible time there. That was when El Bulli was at the peak. Fat Duck was, they were both charging through boundaries that were being broken and sort of showing the way. Do you really think about those things when you're there at the time? No, you don't. You just go, but how do we make this thing better, or how do we do this a little bit easier? Or,
Really? So it was all internal drive.
Yeah,
It wasn't
100%.
kind of, oh, Billy's doing something cool. We should.
No, not
it's
at
just
all.
Just you guys just driving at something.
I think we had quite a different angle from El Bulli. Is in El Bulli wanted to really challenge people.
Yeah.
And you'd be served 40 dishes, and probably 10 of them you probably would hate.
Yeah.
10 you'd kind of like, oh, not sure. 20 you'd be like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But if you're that progressive, but that's their way of being progressive. Ours was slightly different. All of our aim was that everything tasted incredible.
Yeah.
If you put it on a paper plate and ate it in a shed.
It would still work.
Exactly. It would still be delicious. So they're very, and neither's right or wrong. At the end of the day, they're both incredible places.
But did you ever have, like talking about El Bulli, like Mugaritz, even more of an example. Did you ever have like people who just couldn't get their head round? They say like, we pay 300 quid a meal, we just don't get the concept, we haven't enjoyed it. Like, do you remember anyone sort of Heston storming back into the kitchen being like, these idiots don't fucking understand?
No, I mean, you did get the old person that had expectations that were probably a little bit misguided, maybe. The aim is everyone came through the door rubbing their hands together, wanting to have a good time, and they were very open, although a lot were very nervous. But within a couple of minutes, the front of house would, ease them into it, and before they knew it, 5 hours were gone, and they go, "Where's 5 hours gone?"
Yeah.
Because I've not looked at my phone. I've not. It's just nuts.
You can't. It's so sensory that it's almost you couldn't do anything else. It was sort of too much.
And that was early, sort of social media days as well. Yeah. So we weren't so addicted to sharing absolutely everything. But again, that's an evolution, right?
Yeah.
Complete evolution.
Yeah.
But when you joined, you've spoken about it on record not being a very harmonious environment. You're just saying there that it was like 6-day weeks, fucking like 20-hour days. Like, when you look back at that time, how tough was that adapting from the Petit Canal where it was just you and one other chef or you and a KP? And, like how tough was that? Even though, like, so brilliant in terms of experience and pushing boundaries.
I wouldn't say it was difficult. Obviously, you get pretty tired. But at the end of the day, I come from quite a hard-working family. I'm not from, people that laid around. My granddad, my grandma... On both sides, my mum and dad worked really, really hard. So, and because I was a watercress farmer in the morning, then I worked in a restaurant in the afternoon.
You used to double shift.
Doing long days.
Or triple shift.
I was doing it. You're young, you can do it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it was fine. Yeah.
Did you feel guilty if you weren't in the kitchen almost? Like, you'd rather always be working?
Yeah, I mean, we had to start taking a night off during the week at some point, and Heston would cover your section, which was you're probably better off just staying and working.
Yeah.
So you're so worried about it that you just, this is really early days, and you're so worried about running out of stuff. You probably left at 8:30.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
right.
There's only a few hours off, but
but
I mean, it was the start of actually we need to start rethinking how we do this.
Yeah.
Sorry, Freddie. Just at the beginning, Heston's in there. He's obviously got a head full of these ideas. You come in. How quickly does it become? Well, and I'm guessing other chefs are joining all the time because of the popularity. How quickly does it become like a sort of team effort, getting dishes on the menu, working stuff out, versus just Heston sort of bursting with all these ideas?
I mean, early days it was just like you explained. But then, from, say, 05, when we got the Heinz Head, we then got the building in the car park. So that became the development kitchen and prep kitchen. So then we had this development team over there, and we went between the two. And then, at one stage we had some incredible people in the development team, from a scientist that wasn't really a chef, who went on to be very instrumental in the Modernist Cuisine book.
Right, yeah.
Another guy, Kyle Connaughton, has got Single Thread Farm in California, 3-star. I think he might have even gone straight to 3-star, I can't remember.
Wow.
But I mean, like, Francois was in the kitchen, he's got a 2-star and a 1-star in Rotterdam. I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
So at that stage, you had this golden era of like where they are now. They are doing their own amazing stuff. So it was a massive team effort.
But you became head chef after 4 years, just at the age of 25. When you guys had 2 Michelin stars, a year later you got your 3rd star.
Yeah.
And that's when you were talking just now about the renovations, the prep kitchen, the bigger science sort of lab, where you had the scientists, neuroscientists, everyone. Just take everyone through, because we're fascinated. Like, a normal day, Because like you've now gone from a brigade of like 5 or 6 to like 30 people just in the science lab, essentially, or whatever it is.
I mean, prep kitchen, we had a lot of stagiaires back then as well, so maybe 12 to 14 stagiaires. I can't remember how many in the kitchen, but probably, I don't know, call it 20, 25, maybe in the kitchen, and probably 35, 40 front of house. I don't know, it was just a case of coming in every day and checking that everyone had everything they needed to do what they needed to do, be ready, and obviously same as every restaurant, same problems.
Yeah.
You know, aircon's down, fridge has gone down, sink's blocked, dishwasher's not working.
Yeah.
This hasn't turned up, someone's pinched this off a doorstep, you know, all of these sorts of things. And just working with the guys, and a lot of the time we were working on the new stuff and testing that out, but obviously time's quite limited.
Yeah.
But obviously you got your kitchen and your like lab, your sort of experimental lab. So were there certain people who went there every single day and their whole job was just to come up with new stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And then,
but how did that work? Like, was Heston saying, "Come up with this," or "I'm inspired by this," or you were saying, "I'm thinking this"? Or
so I mean, Heston had a lot of incredible ideas that he wanted to try and achieve, and sometimes they're really honed and very clear. Other times it wasn't really clear because it's quite exploratory. Yeah, and that's the beauty of pushing the boundaries. You don't always know exactly where you're going, and sometimes the mistakes came out with a really good result, but people were in the lab, we had people in the prep kitchen, we had stagiaires in the prep kitchen, in the kitchen, we had chefs in the kitchen. It was very much a case of ideas get floated, get talked about. It seems really easy and we all get really carried away because we can see this thing, but actually, how do you do it? So do we need to buy a piece of kit, or do we have to go to the university to go and try and freeze dry something in their freeze dryer in Oxford or Reading, wherever it was? Interesting things like that, or go and talk to this guy because he's an expert in touch and feel. So we want to do something with that and temperature, and so it's pretty nuts, really. Yeah, but a lot of people came to us, I suppose. Yeah, right, because you were doing interesting stuff. Yeah. So that it won't have felt it to you, but I mean, you're 25 is quite young, right? Yeah. To be the, sort of heading up something like that. Did that come easily? Did you sort of just blissfully kind of waltz into it, or no, not at all. I think when I was sort of, I suppose it would have been 2001, 2002, when Heston sort of said, I'd like to work you into a sous chef position. Yeah. I mean, it was fairly unstructured back then. I actually went to work in Chicago for 6 weeks. Right. At Charlie Trotter's. Okay. Because that was a restaurant that he had obviously been to. It was very classically new American, chef's jackets and shirt underneath, and, tall hats and all that sort of stuff. Tasting menu. So I went and spent 6 weeks there, and I came back, and I dread to think what it was like, because they had such a regime about how they ran this place. Yeah. So I came back and I was like, right, we're going to be scrubbing the canopy every night. We're going to polish everything. We're going to be neat and tidy. This has got to happen. That's got to happen. And I probably came back a bit bullish on it. Yeah. Right.
Now I think, all right, Ashely.
Yeah, they're like, oh, hold on a minute. Yeah. So, but I think it's one of those things you learn as you go along. You learn what works. You learn what doesn't work. Yeah. And obviously, we had quite a nice environment to work in. It was a really respectful place. Yeah. And that's my nature too, really.
Were you guys eating like weird star food, or was it like still comfort food?
Whatever you could make in the time, to be honest. It was pretty tight.
Yeah.
When you're in service for 5 hours.
Yeah.
That's 10 hours of service a day.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And there isn't a lot.
You had lunch at like 8 a.m.
Yeah. So we'd do like I think pastry would do lunch, and then we would share out. You do protein today, you do starch, you do veg, you do that. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't,
Yeah. You were remote. Did you get any chance to like have a couple of drinks to unwind in the evening? Did you do anything? Or?
We used to have a few beers after work, and then, but it's when the world started to change and become a bit more sensible. You couldn't give people beer anymore because they had to get in a car and drive.
Yeah.
Which sounds ridiculous now.
Yeah.
But actually back then it was just like, well, yeah, I can have one beer and it's fine, but actually your responsibility to the team, you couldn't really do that. So we used to go to the pub on Sunday and buy everyone drinks in the Heinz Head.
Yeah, nice.
You know,
it feels like, sort of looking in, it was a very kind of well orchestrated, well curated environment.
Yeah.
Were there any ever complete nightmares in the kitchen, you know, when things started to go wrong? And because with something like that that's so sort of curated.
Nightmares.
It must be a day.
Poor day. I mean, there were a few bad through food or just like bad days.
Bad days, food.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah, like
I'd say probably one of the worst days. Well, one of the worst days of my life, I'd say, is probably we had dinner open by that time, so I was the group chef.
Yeah, right. You're across all of it.
The guys, a lot of our team had been out in Hong Kong, and one of my guys from London, one of my sous chefs, and one of our ex-sous chefs from Fat Duck, who left, they come back to go and do this event, and they got tragically killed in a car accident.
Jesus.
And that was pretty fucking horrendous.
So you get a call saying,
well, I thought it was a joke.
Really?
But I was like, you know, you joking, and then you realise quite quickly actually it's not a joke. And of course all the team are out there, and Heston was out there, and it affected everyone.
Yeah.
London, Bray, the whole lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's a horrible thing.
What do you? Cause you can't. I mean, I guess in a sort of normal world, you might close the businesses for a bit, kind of. But I guess you can't do that. Everything has to carry on.
I mean, it was just. Yeah, I mean, it was very tricky. It was very tricky. We had to tell certain people before we told the team, because obviously as soon as you tell anyone outside the circle, it's going to be out, right?
Yeah.
So it was a very complicated few days, but we just had to get on with it.
Yeah.
You had to get on with it, you know, and probably that helps in a way. And
It's got to keep going.
If it was me, I would want that.
Yeah.
You know?
Can you explain to our listeners, we're going to have a little section of like celebrating the genius innovation you brought to cooking worldwide, but the science and thinking behind when you were food pairing by identifying molecular similarities, aka chocolate and caviar. How did that come about? Well, and what were some of your favourite combos?
Yeah, I mean that's a funny one actually, because I think Heston was he was playing around with said two things, chocolate and white chocolate and caviar,
as you do.
And he was like, I think this works really well. So he made these little discs, put the caviar on. And then at that time we had this this software that was all about looking at the different molecules within foods and flavours. And white chocolate and the caviar had some amines that are a protein that are very, very similar. So that was an accidental discovery, but actually worked really well, because when you put the chocolate disc on your tongue, let it melt, you get white chocolate, and then when you start to chew, you get the caviar comes in, and then at a certain point they cross and become like really magical. And that was an extraordinary one. That's probably the best one I think ever that I've experienced there.
But he didn't know that. He was just messing around.
No,
with
he's messing around, like I'm saying, trial and error with a lot of things. You know, we tried a lot of things that are disgusting through trial and error.
So in hindsight, in a weird way, you look at it, you kind of get like sea salty chocolate almost. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, chocolate and salt, right? Now?
Now.
Chocolate and salt.
Yeah.
Seems obvious, right? So, you know, there were a lot of things. Sometimes we'd try and find other things. I think there was one that was, we had this lamb dish. This is quite early on, probably 04, 05. And it was lamb cooked sous vide when we first got this water bottle. We'd probably had it about 2 years by then. Cooked this salad of lamb, and then we had this sort of garlic tuile, caramelized onion puree in these tomatoes. But this whole thing about star anise, garlic, and tomato. Oh, there's one thing missing. Hold on, what am I missing here? I think that was it. Yeah. They had a real similarity, like this garlic and tomato thing.
Yeah.
As a sweet tuile with the lamb.
I mean,
was amazing with star anise, quite through the sauce and whatnot. But that was insane.
You mentioned sous vide there. Like, which were you guys early on that? Because now it's sort of so sort of ubiquitous.
I would say we bought the first water bath in the country.
You made it mainstream,
really?
Yeah.
But was that by accident? Because your stove was like shit.
Well, it used to be an old pub kitchen. We used to have two used to have one solid top over there and one 6-burner there that only 4 worked, and like really crappy ovens and stuff. And there were 3 of us that could cook. Me, Gary, and Heston. Gary was a sous chef at the time.
Yeah.
And we were cooking everything slowly in a pan. So if you imagine this solid top and burners with this boned rolled rabbit in a cylinder that was turned every 30 seconds. But it would take 50 minutes to an hour to cook, right? So literally you needed about 25 arms.
Good.
You had lamb that needed turning. You had veal kidney in its fat in the oven that you had to look after that. All the pork was cooked in these pans. But you just had saucepans frying pans everywhere. And you're just turning stuff. So I think Heston came in and I think his brother-in-law ran a like a science equipment like company, you know, where you've got a catalogue. And he said, look, could you try and order one of these? And I was like, yeah. So I get on the phone. I was like, hi there, I'm from the Fat Duck. Sorry, where? The Fat Duck. I'd never heard of it. I was like, well, it's a restaurant in Bray. I was like, oh, right. So what do you want? I said, well, we'd like to order one of these water baths, just a little 8-litre one. And she's like, well, what are you going to do with it? I said, well, we're going to cook stuff in it, you know. Oh, no, you can't sell you that. No, it's not for that. I was like, no, don't worry about that. We're going to put water in it, and or maybe we'll put oil in it. So we talked them into sending us this water bath, and we started cooking. I think the first thing we cooked was salmon in oil at 42 degrees or something with vanilla and rosemary. But, you know, we had this one water bath. It was all... it had this white painted coating. You know, now they're all stainless steel. And we added to this, and we had loads of water baths at different temperatures. We'd rock up to charity dinners with, you know, a water bath.
Wow.
And they'd be like, what's that?
What are you guys up to?
So yeah, no, it was amazing.
That's crazy.
Another hugely important aspect of your food was the multi-sensory cooking. Can you give us the reasoning to how that sort of came about, and also some examples of that coming to life? Probably the most famous, The Sound of the Sea, right?
Yeah. Well, I think Heston he really was talking to every expert in their field, from people that measured crunch in food, that work with food companies, that, you know, work that no one ever sees, script writers, brain surgeons, people that worked on NLP, touch and feel, all sorts of different aspects that he was really sort of the first person, really, I would say, to go, actually, eating is all of these things together. And maybe other people thought about this sort of stuff, but he really went, well, actually, no, it is about this. It's about how it sounds. It's about how heavy something is, or how light. Is it soft? Is it round? Is it square? Is it sharp? If I hold something sharp, does it make it more acidic? So all of these things, he really sort of brought all of those things into one place. And every time that we worked on a dish, it would encompass all of these things. And it's quite interesting when you cut out sound, for example, Sound of the Sea. And I think this one came about, I'm not sure where it really came about, to be honest. There were so many mad conversations all over the place. But I know Kyle was heavily involved in the lab, because at one stage they were going to get little trays of sand. You had to take your shoes and socks off, but we're like, this is probably just one step too far. We can't facilitate this in a restaurant. But that whole thing about creating a soundtrack, and I know Heston worked with Nick Mason on mixing this soundtrack, because if it was very, very particular, you then, say for you it might work, but for you it might not, because it might not have sounded like the sea when you went. You went somewhere else, right? So we had all of these people come from all over the world, so you had to pick these sounds that would be very common in the most places and still be a beautiful experience.
Can you take the listeners through just quickly if they don't know what it is?
Yeah.
Because they may be saying, what do you mean, the sounds of the sea?
Yeah, so basically, this is it was one of the first iPods as well, to be honest. So a big seashell would come to the, you know, like as big as your hand, would come to the table, and inside was one of the little iPod, I don't know what they're called, nanos or whatever, the tiny little one. And so we had the soundtrack already playing. It had the headphones sort of wrapped around one end of the shell, and we'd put the shell down, ask them to put the headphones on, and the dish would arrive about 30 seconds, a minute later. And it was literally the sounds of the sea. So you'd have some some waves and on some stones. You'd have a little clinking of masks. You'd have a few birds, a few little rumbles of people, maybe a little ice cream van, all sorts of noises going on. And then the dish would arrive, and it was a box with a trough at the bottom, and in there with sand and some shells, piece of glass on top, and then on there the dish was plated. So there was this sort of savoury sand with like fried Japanese eels in it, actually grape nuts in it as well, a little bit of cereal in there for crunch. That was
Really great.
yeah. And then there was over different times different fish, maybe cured, torched, cooked, brined, laid on top of the sand, and then this seafood foam that was very heavy in kombu and sort of dashi style, and then really lightly foamed up. And then so you had the strip of the sand, you had the seafood with sea vegetables, and then you had this foam that was like the sea coming up to the sand.
Wow.
And then you would eat through the dish from one side to the other whilst this thing. And the amount of people that like ended up crying.
Yeah, you'd have people weeping.
Yeah. I mean, it was normal. At least a couple every day.
Really?
Every so. Oh yeah.
Like we got another one gone.
Yeah. Or people that didn't want to take it off. They were like, "This is amazing." I just
really, I found my happy place.
Yeah.
So you can't have that with a veal.
No.
Yeah, you have to give it back to us.
When Hester, were you always bought into what was going on? Were there ever times when he's out of the room, everyone's going,
This is a bit too much, Hester.
I think he's lost it now.
No.
You were all kind of in, and everyone was.
Yeah, I mean, you're all trying to create something amazing and make it happen for 42, 44 people at every service. So there is a degree of practicality with things, but you want to push it as far as you can, and that's quite a hard balance to get.
100%,
But it was. I think back, I'd love to go back for a few days.
Yeah.
If you could go back.
Really? Yeah.
Well, were there any disasters? You talked about like the kind of step too far, putting the sand under people's feet.
Yeah.
But any things which still you remember which didn't make the menu? Where everyone's like, okay, that is just a bit too crazy.
Or did make the menu, and you think that didn't quite go as we were.
Yeah, I mean, snail porridge was a great result out of something really bad.
Yeah,
Really?
So we were trying to make these. It was before we had development kitchen, and I would say we probably rushed it a little bit. But the idea was to make this butter that was intensely green with parsley, garlic, a little bit of lemon zest, ground almonds, and then ham diced up in it, and some mushroom diced up in it. And he wanted to put it inside a blanched leek skin,
Right.
and then roll it back up like a cannelloni.
Okay,
Because
yeah.
we had a cannelloni with cuttlefish, but we were pretty sure this was going to melt when we heated it up in the water bath, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, we went to try and serve it. It melted. It was a disaster. And at that time, Gary, the sous chef at the time, he came back from being in New York with his girlfriend, and he went to, I don't know, an Asian restaurant where he had congee, and it just blew his mind that people ate this thing. And all of a sudden, within about 20 minutes of this butter and him coming back from New York and eating this congee for breakfast, snail porridge had almost been finished.
Really?
Yeah, because the butter was there. We just adjusted it a little bit, putting porridge oats in, and all of a sudden you had this savoury porridge.
Yeah.
Well, what we now know as savoury porridge, we weren't into history back then.
Yeah.
And so out of that, and then we added snails, and we added fennel salad with the parsley and the ham. And, something that was a disaster came probably one of the most famous dishes in the world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stories about sort of burnout in this industry. You guys are working 100-hour weeks. I mean, you said earlier that actually you're a workaholic. You didn't mind. But I was just curious to think, like, Heston, even more so than you, probably as the big sort of don of that whole place, was dedicating himself, and he seems to have a brain which can never switch off.
Yeah.
Even when he has a day off, he's going to see neuroscientists, he's going to see actors, he's going to, always... Yeah. Obviously, earlier this year, he had a bit of a period where he had to, sort of be sectioned and go into somewhere to look after his own health. Do you feel that, because a lot of people do say we speak to that, like, it can slowly build and then explode. Do you feel like maybe that is some exposure to just, like, overworking, and now he's kind of reached a peak? He can never, Marco gave back his 3 stars because he said, like, there's no better than this.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a cheat now because I'm not behind the stove. Do you feel that, I don't know, Heston may have just, like, he's always pushing for more, and actually he's reached such a high peak that's kind of now come down. And also, you still in contact with him? You still friends with him? Obviously, you're now part.
Yeah,
now.
I mean, I've been gone a little while now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's hard for anyone. Yeah, I was quite close to seeing the evolution of a man that no one had heard of to probably not even being able to go out in Australia because just too famous.
Yeah.
And they, it's amazing. And I know a lot of people crave fame and that adoration, but actually year after year as it builds and it builds, it becomes really quite difficult. And you can see how people manifest it in probably different ways.
Yeah.
I think it's a hard one. I mean, I don't think boundaries are being broken like those days back then. Now but it doesn't mean the restaurants are not any good.
No.
There's amazing restaurants here. It's just a different era. And I mean, burnout. I mean, look, we worked really hard early on, but quite quickly we had an MD that came in that was not from restaurant world at all. He's actually a customer.
Yeah.
Really?
And was with the business for a long time, like, good 10, 12 years. And in that time, that was when things really changed, and we started putting more effort into giving more people time off, more structure, proper, healthy food, doing things with the staff. Like, it was really, well, why are you doing that? And you're like, well, I don't know, really. This is what we normally do.
That's how it goes,
Well, we should be doing this. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So things did change quite quickly, and it became an amazing place to work. But we didn't, I'd say we probably worked 60 hours a week.
But I mean, were you surprised? Obviously, now you're no longer part of the company to see, cause I'm guessing you read the news, or did you hear through us?
I did. I mean, it's it's a shame when anyone goes through anything. I mean, everyone's got their stuff going on. I mean, it's probably a privilege he doesn't have, is for things to be dealt with on his own and in his own private thing, and people don't, you get forced into the media in some things, and that's I think that's really bad. And I hope he's working on it, and he's back in Bray, so back to the restaurant and back in the thing that he loves and his in his little world of places. So
it's often the geniuses who have something. I mean, he is obviously one of the greatest ever chefs who ever walked the planet. So. Talking about one of the greatest, you're also one of the greatest. 2 years after opening Dinner by Heston, you get 2 Michelin stars. But how do you achieve a 2 Michelin star standard when you're doing 150 covers a night? You're overseeing 50 chefs. Did you have a process? Because is it cooking then? Is it kind of more of an assembly line? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but do you know what I mean?
The easiest way to explain it is if you go into most kitchens. I mean, it's a different era now. I think if you roll back 10 years or 15 years when we opened, like 2011, if you went into most kitchens of a certain size, you'd have precision and recipes in pastry and baking. All we do is we have that precision and recipes in the savoury kitchen. It's as simple as that. But we think about writing in, it used to be, and even at Fat Duck, when I started, we'd copy recipes from each other's book to each other's book. It's completely nuts, because it's Chinese whispers, right? How is it? That's never going to work, is it?
No, especially with Ben's handwriting.
No.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
I've got books full of getting it off a chef, and it's like blitz, blitz, blitz. And I've literally written that because you're sort of getting it quick. And then you read it now, and you're like, well,
but now
I really know what you meant by that.
But now, like for instance, with the rice base for the risotto, for the rice and flesh, we'd say, take this pan. You put it on this induction, so you're not on a solid top, trying to guess. You put it on here, whatever it was. Number 6, oil in, rice in, toast 3 minutes. So the technology allowed you to be precise. So you could follow the right amount of toasting. You still got to be a chef. You still got to use your eyes and your ability to cook. There's just tighter guidelines to get you there without making as many mistakes. Or people cutting corners. So that has rolled from Fat Duck. I would say it was at its strongest at dinner. We did 300 covers a day. That ethos is what we've built into doing Devonshire.
Right.
It's a completely different restaurant. It's incredibly simple compared to that. But
built on the same
it's
ethos.
the same principle of how do we do this for this many people? Well, we We narrow down the mistakes that can be made. You've still got to taste. You've still got to cook. You've still got to teach people to cook. But there are parameters that are tighter than just, I'll just do that. You know.
But you also made your front of house work in the kitchen for 2 weeks. Was that to for them to understand how tough it was, or
not how tough it was, to get under the skin of what the dishes were?
Okay.
You know, so I mean, some people were more than willing to spend 2 weeks in the kitchen. Others really didn't want to do it, you know.
Really?
And that's fine. I understand that. It wasn't about making them work hard and get really tired. It was about actually really understanding. So when you're at the table and someone asks you a question, you know absolutely everything about how that dish is made.
Yeah.
And if you think of the complexity at the Fat Duck and dinner, to share those stories, you're only going to get them. You can only do so much by reading. When you experience it and you're in it and you can see it and you can feel it, that's when you really sort of get those valuable sort of bits of information that you can.
Did most of those front of house people, even if they were resistant at the beginning, people liked it?
Yeah, they loved it.
Yeah, like, you know,
they loved it because they, and also it was really good because you connect them into the kitchen team and you. The idea is that you want to join the kitchen in the front as much as you possibly can. However you can do it. You know, different restaurants have different ability to do different things, or to different extremes. If you can do it to the maximum you possibly can, that's a brilliant thing, I think.
Throughout your career, what was the most amount of work you had to put into one single dish? Ari, like meat fruit. Like, what was the most man hours into one dish?
Man hours? Whoa. Crikey.
Was meat fruit a few or not?
No, that took a couple of weeks. It wasn't too bad.
That's quite long.
No, that was a breeze, Freddie.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't too bad. Like we there, you know, with the TV programs, meat fruit came about, but we had this amazing parfait, foie gras and chicken liver, that we used on the quail dish in the restaurant. And Heston's like, can you work out a way to put that into a meat fruit? And we're like, yeah, but we'll have a look. And this is at the time we were like planning dinner and stuff. And he's like, because it'd be great to do at dinner. We're like, whoa, that's quite a lot of work. You know, when you go from Fat Duck, 40, 50 people cooking for 40 people, to going to do 300 covers in London, different kettle of fish. So I said, well, leave it with us a couple of weeks. And all of the meat fruits that were for the TV, they were like hard terrines and pâtés that have been reshaped. So they were easy to handle. But of course, your chicken liver parfait had to be the best chicken liver parfait when it was eaten.
Yeah.
So if you did anything that's detrimental to it, that would be style over substance, right? So we worked on it for a couple of weeks, and then we ended up with these two oranges. I've probably got a picture somewhere. One was really shiny, like this glass, and the other one had holes in it, like an orange. The only trouble was, and we sort of were like, Heston like that one, I like that one. But it was irrelevant because we didn't know how this one came out like that and that one came out like that.
It wasn't deliberate.
It is deliberate now.
Yeah.
But the trick was, once your parfait was frozen and you joined two semi-spheres together with a blowtorch and then smoothed out the line, you had to go to like -40 in the freezer with a metal stick in it, and then literally have your mandarin gel sat in a bain-marie in a water bath at 32 degrees, and then you would dip it in once, and then you pop it into, I don't know, a board with holes in, or polystyrene or whatever, and then you'd let it refreeze, and you know, like the frost on your windscreen. So it took about 2-3 minutes. Once it'd frozen, you dip it in again, you let it set, take the stick out, you put it in the fridge, let it defrost overnight. That would then yield the dimples. But if someone's rushing the dipping, they came out like the shiny glass. So you had to let it you had to break the structure in the first gel.
Yeah.
You know, because the water in the gel would expand and break the texture, I suppose, and then you redip it. So it became, that's how we knew, you know.
Mad. Did your brain think like that when you were a kid?
No.
No, is it like, so this
to be honest,
we didn't
really think about it then. We were just like, well, let's work out how we can try and work out how this works. It's trial and error.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
What's the dish you're most proud of when you look back over the last 25 years?
25 years.
Well, I mean, I don't have to restrict it, but
it's really hard. I think the things that I've been lucky enough to be involved with there, you know, when you have dishes attached to what you've been part of, i.e. working with Heston at the Duck and then dinner, most chefs are lucky if they get one or two that they become synonymous with, right? And I think ours was so individual and unique a lot of the time that it's very hard to pick something. Yeah, I always say to people, it's like picking between children. You can't. I am just incredibly proud of what dinner was for what it did in terms of looking back into our culinary history.
Well, 100,000 word sort of dossier you and Heston put together.
Yeah.
In the British Library.
Yeah, and we had researchers on it, we had writers on it, we had food historians, and you know, to look back in that and go, well, that sounds really cool. Yeah. And some things sound really cool, but they just never worked out. Yeah. You know, like there was calves brains with rose flavored sauce, and it was just disgusting. There's no way I could do anything with that, but we tried. We did persevere. Yeah. But I think the whole movement of that, looking back at your culinary history and what we did at dinner, really made people think about their own cooking. You know, whether they're from a different country in London, this country. Yeah. Actually, you know what? I'm going to look back in my heritage, and I'm going to bring that forward. And I know, you know, Rene has, you know, been the master of it in the Nordic kind of circle, and that was an era where people started to look back at their own thing.
If you did have to pick one kid, though, I mean, Ben's lucky; he's only got one kid, so he's not going to upset
my favourite.
But today, if you had to pick
kid,
one, it changes day to day, isn't it? But
I mean,
what's popping into your head now?
Favourite dish? Is this favourite dish or?
Yeah.
I think probably one of my favourite dishes is, if I could eat it right now, I would. It was the roast foie gras with marinated salmon, these crab biscuits, crystallised seaweed, and oyster emulsion. That was unbelievable.
It's delicious.
It's probably the best dish I've ever eaten in my life. Yeah.
Was that dinner or Fat Duck?
That was Fat Duck. Early days, yeah.
What's mad for you? Because like I think it was Marco Pierre White who said like no chef really ever creates an original dish. You know, whereas
you guys were every
between
day.
You and Heston and the broader team, it's all original dishes.
Yeah, I
guess
sort
of mad.
I guess you use stuff from all over the place,
of course,
but it's about your creative mind. It's like singer-songwriters, isn't it? Are they reinventing the wheel? No, they're telling the story of what's in their head.
Yeah, of course.
And how they put something forward in the style they do, with the instruments that they do. Yeah.
But with the dish you've just said there, no one could go like, oh right, that's
I did that one.
Yeah,
I remember, you know,
God,
like
it was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so good.
Yeah. It's amazing.
We're talking about good. I mean, we've actually really got no time for your go-to, so we're going to finish off with your 3-course go-to meal. But Ben, you've obviously probably going to have to have it as like a going home present.
Yeah, I'll send you home with a.
Well, what have you made?
I just made some ox cheeks and Guinness.
Oh, nice.
With some bread, but we haven't got time for Ashely.
What, in like a sandwich or?
It's not in a sandwich.
Oh, sorry, but you said with some bread.
Have it in a bowl. You're going to dunk the soda bread in.
Right.
It's just a bit of like nice home cooking, but we haven't got time for it, Freddie.
We do.
We don't. We get the clock on George's desk.
Yeah, true.
I want to hear Ashely give us his go-to.
Okay, well, give us your go-to, and then is there any way we can give it as a go-home?
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Okay,
all right.
So, Ashely, what was your go-to 3-course meal?
Oh, I'd have to say that foie gras dish.
Yeah. Is that a starter or a main?
Starter.
Yeah, sorry.
I'd then go roast chicken.
Yeah.
I think it's just my favourite.
Not Hestonised.
Yeah, can we just get get your roast chicken? What are you doing?
Just I say standard, but just classic roast chicken, good roasting juices, amazing roast potatoes, whatever veg is around. There's obviously lots of butter around.
Oh yeah.
And what more do you need?
Right. So nothing clever with the chicken. You're not starting it upside down and twisting it.
No. Just cooked really nicely.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Ashely. That's what Ashely said.
And then probably dessert. I'd have to go for tipsy cake from dinner, actually.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Or saying that, actually, chocolate mousse from Devonshire is probably. Yeah, I'd say chocolate mousse from Devonshire.
I'd say you might be able to.
But if you were going to go tipsy cake, what is it, just for the listeners?
It's balls of brioche that have been frozen when they're small, rolled in butter, then sugar. Ugh. You put 5 in a little cast iron pot. You prove it like a cake. You bake it like a cake. And then when it's golden brown and they've risen, you then put it into an oven that only the bottom stone is on, so no top heat, so it conducts through the pot. And you add sugar, cream, Sauterne and brandy with vanilla, and it as you put it in, it bubbles, and it turns to a light boozy caramel.
Oh,
It's like a pan pedi, but it really is
and
lost.
it soaks into
So
the,
drunk, it's
it
all over the
soaks
place.
into the brioche. It's bloody amazing, to be honest.
Good. Have you been back to dinner? Or-
I have. I went back in July, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went back for lunch. Yeah, it was.
Did
good.
they look after you? I mean,
have
Chile, you
to
have to pay.
the food was as good as I was there. To be
Yeah.
honest, it was pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I
Not
guess you've
quite
left
as good.
them with
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
it's
the
dossier.
playbook.
dinner does what it
exactly.
does. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it was brilliant. It was great.
Well, Ashley, you've been absolutely wonderful. We're going to send you home with a little treat. Just Ben, one more time. What was it?
I mean, I nicked it off the menu at the Devonshire.
Well, what is it?
It's ox cheeks and Guinness.
Okay.
I haven't done it in a sewer pudding. I've just done it, freelance. But
Ashley, you've been absolutely wonderful. We could have spent hours more down here, but obviously you've got to go on, and so do we. But we are going to ask you, what song do you want us to play you out with?
Oh, crikey.
This isn't on YouTube, by the way. We're not copyright allowed. George,
Song
remind us.
to play out with. Do you know what? It's stuck in my head at the moment.
Go on.
Is a song called "Rainy Night in Soho" by the Pogues.
Oh, lovely.
nice.
That is feels like a Devonshire anthem.
Yeah. Seems like a lovely way to see us out. Ashley, you've been wonderful. Guys, please don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. Also subscribe on any podcast platform you're listening to. Leave us a wonderful rating, and we'll see you all again next week. Ashley Palmer, what's those your go-to, sort of, but mostly just your incredible career.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Cheers.
so much.